Hey everyone, welcome back to Stay Positive. If you're tuning in via YouTube, then you know I don't have the foam ball today. I had a foam ball that was very big and it was supposed to be better for soundproofing, but when I listen back, it's like it only really works if I speak directly into the foam ball and it's completely blocking my face, which maybe that would be an option, but I decided to go against it, so I'll do a little bit more audio editing for you guys without that foam ball, and yeah, you win. YouTube comments, you win. So for today's episode, I've got a cool guest, as always, right? But this one, she's got so many awesome stories. She's hilarious. She's a comedian. And she just had her first comedy album come out. So you guys got to go buy that. It's called Father's Day. You can go to her website, sofiaalexandra.com. Oops, spoilers for the name. Or you can go and buy it on iTunes, listen on Spotify, all the fun things. It is hilarious. I listened to it. She also has been on Comedy Central. And I did her podcast because she had a podcast formerly called Reality Bites. Now it's called Private Parts Unknown. Check her out on that, or 420 Day Fiance. But anyway, guys, let me just introduce her. Today's guest is Sofiya Alexandra. Before we get into today's episode, I just want to shout out our sponsor, which is Hero Cosmetics. They actually sent over some of their Mighty Patch, which is their hydrocolloid acne patches. They're sort of like stickers that you put on your acne. Basically, I've been stressed. So yes, I get a decent amount of pimples in sort of this area. I put on makeup so you can't see. I'm ashamed. But no, if you put on one of those little Mighty Patches, I'm really impressed because basically you put it on overnight. 6 hours is kind of what the recommended length is. And when you take it off, it really flattens it out. Especially if you have a red pimple, which happens, when you really don't want one. It'll flatten that out. If you've had experience with acne in the past, like me, you've probably gone through a lot of chemicals and creams and trying all these prescription things that are expensive. And this is a really nice alternative to that. If you are interested in this, go to herocosmetics.com and you can use the Stay Positive code, which is actually, ironically, Stay Positive 15, STAYPOSITIVE 15. If you use that, you get 15% off. So go for it.
Perfect.
Hey, okay. Hello, Sofiya. How are you doing?
Hi. I'm good. It's so nice to see you
Yeah,
again.
I know. I feel like I just got to meet you and Courtney, your co-host on what was, I think, Reality Bites at the time, and then now is Private Parts Unknown, which is a really great name.
Thank you so much.
But yeah, that was a lot of fun, and I remember I met you guys out out at like a house. I don't know. So I was like confused because I think I got the address, and then I was like, oh yay, here's somebody's house. It was very nice.
Thank you. I am in that house right now.
Oh, okay, good. I don't mean good. I'm glad I didn't say where it was,
No, you
but
can.
Yeah, I was like very impressed. So congrats.
Really, the congrats are to my husband for being much more successful than me.
Great. Yes.
I'll pass him on. I pass it on. I'll tell him.
Okay, good. Well, good. We got that out of the way. But yeah, and then also congratulations, not just on the house, but on the on your release of Father's Day, which is your comedy album, which was #1, which is really exciting.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I am so excited that I finally released an album after doing stand-up for 10 years. I think
that's incredible. I mean,
men, I think, tend to release earlier. And with women, we're like, well, but I'm not quite the perfect comedian. I'll just wait for another decade. Instead of like, it's not supposed to be perfect, Sofiya. Just get it out, Just get an album out so that you can, start putting out things. Because when I got breast cancer, I was like, oh, if I died today, I was like, there's not a lot of comedy out there to show for how long I've been doing it. So then I was like, well, fuck, I got to do an album. So.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, I didn't realize that would have played into that. I did hear you speak about the fact that you're a breast cancer survivor. And so then was that kind of like, I don't know, I guess, did you feel as if that kind of started the momentum to release this album, or did you take some time to, I guess, think about what other types of things you would put out into the world?
It's everything. You kind of get this weird clarity of like, oh, this is important. This is not important. This person isn't worth your time. Oh, God, I should invest more time into spending you know, on these people that have been there for me, whatever. You make all of those kind of decisions and like you see all that stuff at the same time. It's not really, and it's painful too. It sounds really nice when you're like, oh, suddenly I got clarity and like everything was perfect
involved.
No, it's like cutting limbs off to be like, oh, this no longer serves me. This is a bad idea. I should, or, you know, it sucks kind of taking stock of your life and being like, oh, I've been crappy at this, you know, it sucks, but it's hopefully where you grow. And so, yeah, I think the album's probably the least of what I got out of the cancer reckoning.
Yeah. No. I mean, I'm excited to hear that at least you kept comedy around, because that's something that, you know, I think obviously, you know, or at least I think is valuable to me, but I can kind of even see like, you know, that being something that somebody might find isn't useful to them or is causing more stress or whatever. But luckily,
it's like any other kind of shit. It's like everybody deals with it differently. You know, some people don't want to go on stage at all. Some people need it. Like I needed it as a constant in my life to just keep making jokes. And it was just, it allowed me to deal with what I was going through in like kind of little bite-sized chunks. Like joke-sized chunks are easier to consume, like how fucked up everything is, versus the big chunks that you are just trying to constantly work through. It's like everything is moving so fast when you get a diagnosis and they're just, you know, the treatment kicks off so quickly. It's like, oh, you have surgery in a week. Oh, you start chemo super soon thereafter. All of that happens so fast that I think your brain just takes a really long time to catch up with it. So having something that allows you to like only absorb the experience in little tiny bits that allow you to kind of laugh and have an outlet, I think to me that was really valuable. But I could also see how you could be like, well, that's the last thing I want to do is to try to make strangers laugh. I totally get that too.
Yeah. And then have you kind of, I don't know, I even think with like recent events, not just, you know, pandemic, obviously, but everything that's kind of changed in the world, or like coming to terms with like, oh, okay, this is what our country is, history stuff, or just even within like comedy community stuff. It kind of has made me like come to terms with like, okay, what am I actually doing here? Is it helpful to me and other people and stuff like that? I don't know if you've had other realizations about your comedy or what sorts of things you specifically like to talk about.
You mean like a recent reckoning?
Yeah, I guess, or over, you know, even within your life experience, because you specifically went through cancer too. I mean, of course, that's, you know, you've kind of had probably to come to terms with that a lot sooner than most people. But yeah, I guess even with the context of pandemic and suffering of the world.
I think the thing that's really similar to pandemic is like I had kind of the best case scenario cancer wise, knock on wood. You know, I was stage 1 and triple positive, which meant that I was a good candidate for radiation, for chemo, for hormone treatment, all of that stuff. But the thing that sucks about cancer and like other people who, I mean, for me, this was only a couple years. It was like a year of treatment and then like at least a year of probably like getting my body and everything in shape. And I don't mean physically in shape. I mean like not huffing and puffing after having had like Herceptin. But anyway, I guess the thing about it is when you're in a pandemic, you're also arrested in the same way that you are when you're going through cancer treatment. Like when you feel bad, you just have to lay there and you're divorced from the world for weeks or sometimes months when it's, you know, towards the end of your treatment and it's really too much to do anything. And the pandemic is just like that, except for physically you don't feel sick. You feel sick mentally and spiritually and emotionally and all of these other ways. So in a weird way, it's like I've been preparing for the pandemic by having cancer.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And yeah, not that this is great for me. I'm not like, woo, riding this thing out, thriving. I think I definitely am not thriving, but I think it does prepare you for like this weird arrested part of your life where you're not moving forward in the way that you expect it to be. And it's circumstances that are outside of your control.
Yeah. No, it's a good way to put it. I think it's like, I've heard some people say like, oh yeah, this, you know, certain part of their life, or like if they've explored, they happen to just be really into mindfulness or something, you know, on a very lighter note. And then they're like, yeah, I mean, I just do it because, you know, and then it's like, oh, okay, good thing. Who knew that this was going to happen and actually would come in handy, and nobody wants it to, but you know, it does. So then here we are. But I'm also, okay, so I got to say though, like, I know you were saying like, oh, you know, sometimes, as comedians, we feel like, oh, it has to be perfect before we put out an album. I got to say, I feel like your album is really like close to perfect. If you don't feel that way. I mean, I think it sounded great. Like, I'm really, you know, I think you also have a great style of comedy. So, you know, it was really fun to listen to. But of course, I'm just impressed with like the topics you're able to cover and make funny, and you're like very comfortable, you know, in your voice. So I feel like as an audience member or a listener, I'm like very comforted, like, you know, in the sense that like, oh, she's got this handled, like we can laugh, you know? So I think that's really, it's a great album for people who haven't listened to it yet. But yeah, kind of going into that.
Thanks so much. That really means a lot from another super funny person, and that just revealed that I think I'm super funny.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, I'm like, you know, someone else who's like as great as I am. No, that's not how I meant it to sound. That was obnoxious. I was trying to say you're hilarious and I enjoy your comedy and I think you're wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
So to hear a compliment from you, it means a lot more than if a compliment from somebody that I do not think is funny.
Yeah, those people can screw off. But yeah, no, I truly believe it. And I think like I'm always impressed with, you know, I think as comedians, we want to tackle tough topics, but you not only do that in your album, you know, you also are doing that in your podcast, kind of just like across the board. I feel like you're representing a really good, as much as annoying as it sounds, but it's like a brand in the sense that like you have a voice, you know, so not in like the icky marketing way, but like, you know, I think especially with, you know, formerly Reality Bites, but Private Parts Unknown. It's a really cool podcast. Like the fact that you and Courtney are able to talk about sex so frankly, and then you're also traveling, which is really exciting because, you know, I think that is something that hasn't been explored yet, sexuality globally, you know, because I think that's something that takes time to really immerse yourself in that, you know, whether you're a tourist, like it's not going to happen super fast, right? Or, you know, something that's like, I watch a ton of food shows, right? Talk about Parts Unknown. Or,
exactly.
You know, and they're so fun. But I think it's becoming harder and harder to find like a different angle, right? Because everybody's done it so well. But I really think your guys' podcast is onto something, and specifically, you know, you guys as comedians and how you're able to comment on that stuff. But I guess my long question.
Thanks so much.
Of course, my long question would be, you know, how did you find your way into that topic and become what is, for all intents and purposes, like a comfortable host so that your audience can be comfortable in those topics too?
Well, I definitely feel like I have to say that Private Parts Unknown and Reality Bites is Courtney's baby first. She's been the one consistent part through all the different co-hosts. But Courtney and I are writing partners and best friends, and we've been working together for like about a decade now on so many different projects that we just do because we love each other and we think what we come up with is funny, and it, like, you know, it fills our cup. So we've been partners in crime for a long time. But we specifically were trying to decide what to do with the podcast when I was her guest host on one of the later seasons, the one that we interviewed you on. And then we were thinking, like, it seems that we've done all of the relationship type interviewing that we could really do in this format. And then we were talking about, like, well, what do we want to do next? What is the thing that actually fascinates us or compels us, or, you know, what do we want to explore? And we were like, you know, it'd be great to know what things are like all over the world. And we were talking about how we love Anthony Bourdain and he had passed and all that stuff. So we were like, Parts Unknown, Private Parts Unknown, because we want to explore sexuality around the world. And I think one of the reasons that, we haven't seen anybody tackle this, is no one wants to pay for you to travel internationally to interview people about this unless you're already like a fancy person. Sure, yeah. Like if you're Christian, I'm on poor, and then you're doing like a serious thing, yes, people will pay for you. If you're two dipshit comedians that are like, we want to make jokes but also go get happy ending massages in Japan, there isn't as much of a market for that when you're quote unquote nobody. That doesn't mean we're not going to keep doing it. We believe in it, which is why we like fund it ourselves. Occasionally we've gotten trips paid for through like applying through different programs or grants. So that's something that is just important enough for us to work on it on our own and to figure out how to travel cheaply, how to travel, say, when you go to Helsinki, in the middle of the winter, it's cheaper, things like that.
Sure. Strategic.
And yeah, exactly. And it's something that I feel like everybody has projects that are their passion projects that they really believe in. We believe this is going to be something, and we believe in it already being something. So that is just a pleasure for us to learn and to be curious and kind of be the kind of tourist that does things that you might not be able to do when you travel. Say, like, not everyone is going to go get a happy ending massage, but maybe once we tell you about how we did it, maybe when you travel, you will. Right. So we kind of don't mind being the guinea pigs and also the dipshits when we go somewhere and we're not, all up on everything.
No, yeah, I think it's a really good point. It does, because of all types of tourism, I guess, and like, people know where to go for restaurants, people know, certain things that, yeah, of course, that I think is pretty standard, but this is something that is actually a big part of tourism that I think maybe is less talked about. I feel like I didn't know, I definitely didn't know a lot of this stuff for sure, but I remember in college, we watched a video on the fact that like Turkey is one of the main places for like women in the US sometimes to go for male prostitutes or male sex workers. And that's like, I mean, it's, plenty else is happening there. And I think there was, this was a while ago, but, yeah, I was like, oh yeah, I guess that is something that like you kind of hear about, but it's mainly from like the male perspective, or, maybe it's sort of not talked about as like a tourism thing, but it's very interesting. And not also just like, your guys' conversations about what it's like to just be dating in that country as somebody who is locally there, which is great too, because I think I certainly make assumptions too. I think even listening to your Japanese episodes, I was sort of like, oh, I watch like Japanese reality shows, and then I'm like, yeah, I guess I know everything I need to know. And then it's like, oh yeah, I definitely don't know anything. And of course, it's like interesting to hear different perspectives in general.
And one thing that I think that's really cool about traveling is if you do it right, you hate to leave when you're leaving, and you are also like, I only scratched the surface. And that's what we learn every time we travel. Now we're like, well, we have to go back to Finland, and like we have to go back to Mexico City, and we have to go back to Tokyo. Yeah. And one of the things about things that you don't know about like sex in other countries is like, in America, sex work isn't legal. Mm-hmm. So going to a place like Tokyo and finding out that there's all of these levels of sex work and intimacy work that we can't even imagine. And like, that's a cornucopia. Yeah. Like to have somebody explain to you, oh, these are ways in which people get their needs taken care of, and it's totally accepted. Even that is enough of a thing to blow your mind. Sure. And then when you participate in like hiring a sex worker as a woman, like I didn't know I would ever have that experience. True. And how powerful it felt and good. And just to know that it was also pleasurable for him. It was tight. Yeah. I gotta say, it was awesome.
That's great. Yeah. And then like also, yeah, the fact that you're doing this podcast and then also in your comedy, just talking about, I mean, I think it's tough. I find it very hard personally to talk about sex on stage or just, on a podcast or anything, because, that's just how I am, but it happens still. And it's like, it's a huge part of comedy, right? And I really enjoy people's comedy who do cover that. And I was very impressed with your, This Is Not Happening episode. Not that was about sex necessarily, but just that it's like an intimate
graphic
your grandpa's dick surgery, and it was hilarious, and people should watch that as well. But it kind of made me think about, okay, sometimes I get worried maybe about talking about sex. I'm like, oh, I think my parents might see this video or something like that. There's sort of that family pressure, or who knew you, who or whatever, who knows you as not like a sexual person, then hears that you are. Oh my God, what? So it's just, I don't know. I'm very curious to hear how you are about all that, and what kind of has gotten you to the comedian you are today.
It's interesting that you say like, oh yeah, that it's awkward to talk about that. So like, the grandpa dick surgery story, like after that happened, I didn't talk about it for, I think, 2 years to anybody. Like it was truly like a scarring experience for me. Yeah. And then I told the story at the stand-up show that I used to run called Surprise, and I got such a huge response to it that I was like, oh, there's something there. And I'm really glad that I recorded it on my phone, because I truly blanked out when I was telling it. It was just such a weird thing to channel again. I was like, oh, I'm literally going back in time to this like incredibly painful and like traumatic experience, but I'm doing it in a way where I'm trying to see the humor in it, right. And I was not able to process it without completely being blanked out through it. So I'm glad I had the recording to then listen back and be like, oh, these are the parts that people found funny. This is what I can do with this. And so, yeah, that was kind of one of I feel like I tell about 3 stories that are like 10-minute stories on stage. One is that one. And another one is about getting busted masturbating with boys when I was a little kid, when I was like 5 years old. And that to me was one of my most shameful memories. Like I felt like when I would think about it, I would be like, oh my God, if anybody ever found out about this, I would die. Like this is so traumatic and embarrassing, and no. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to start talking about it on stage. And then from the first time I told that story on stage, I felt so much better.
Oh, yeah.
And it felt so freeing. And then I was like, if anybody from my family sees this, I truly do not care. And I also thought, wondering whether my family was going to reject me for like jokes was actually kind of hilarious, because if they were going to reject me for anything, it would have been like all of these other things, So I really was like, at this point, it's all in.
Yeah.
It's all in, and like I'm just throwing it out there. I don't put it in anybody's face or anything, but it's all public, all of my profiles. If my family looks on Twitter and Instagram or follows me, like it's pretty clear. If they listen to any podcasts, they know. But what's cool is when I did an album release show for my album like a couple weeks ago, my family all came to the Zoom show and heard me do this like show and tell about my grandpa that was like pretty X-rated, because my grandpa left me some porn tapes.
Oh, really?
Well, not left me. He left them, but I claimed them as something that I wanted.
Nice. Vintage.
So, yeah. It's real vintage. There's some very serious hair in these tapes.
Oh, yikes.
But yeah, I mean, if they watched that and they thought it was funny, I'm like, cool.
Yeah.
And there's some of my jokes they don't think are funny. And again, I'm like,
yeah, sorry.
What am I supposed to do? I can't keep being afraid. I do keep having nightmares that I get a sleeve tattoo and that my mom sees me and that I want to die.
Oh, interesting.
Isn't that weird? Symbol. I also have 4 tattoos. What am I?
Yeah. Then it
makes no sense.
You have it. Yeah, you're already good. But the sleeve is pushing it, I guess.
Yeah. I was like, that's it. She will disown me.
Wow. Well, yeah. I mean, the fact that so many things there. I do like that. I think sometimes I will sometimes write, or at least maybe not necessarily stand up, but sometimes write stand up just from like shame, right? So it'll be like, ooh, there's this thing. Even if it's not sexual necessarily. Sometimes it feels like, oh, I feel so embarrassed that I'm like, I did that mean thing, or I thought that terrible thought, and then you like put it in your writing, and then it kind of makes it feel like, okay, I guess, I guess this is not as bad as it sounds, or like people aren't going to reject you outright. Then it kind of is liberating like that. And I mean, even the fact that you have this relationship with your grandfather, who has since passed, which I'm sorry to hear that, but it sounded like such.
I love that you were like, I apologize. Did you murder him, Sierra? Were you the St. John's Hospital that mismanaged his care? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I apologize. But yeah, so I mean, it was really, watching. You tell that story where you're literally translating to him this very intimate surgery. And then the fact that, you, I guess, have inherited his porn. It is clear that he's had a huge impact on you. And like, yeah, how is his sort of, because grandparents too, I would put in the same category, right? As like, ooh, I don't want them to know necessarily about my business. And yeah, so has he kind of helped you maybe become more comfortable in who you are? Because it sounds like he was had to be comfortable in front of you.
Yeah, my grandpa didn't give a fuck about anybody's feelings about him, for better or worse. Nice. And like for sure sometimes for worse, but he just lived his life entirely on his terms. And like that's for sure like very male. Very few women I know have ever lived their life completely on their terms like that. I mean, he sailed all over the world after World War II. He volunteered to fight in the war when he was like 17. So he sailed, in his early 20s. He went to 45 countries. He sailed all over the world. And the whole time he was married, but he definitely had sex with other women, probably in every one of those countries. He told me about loving to visit geishas. Like that was a thing that he shared with me. So our relationship has always been like completely inappropriate. Okay. He just shares things with me that shared things with me that he never should have. But I mean, I think in a weird way, that's what bonded us. And also I felt really comfortable like telling him, when I couldn't tell my mom something, I could be like to him, like, hey, I'm wondering about like not being with my boyfriend anymore. Like, I know he seems like he's a really safe bet and he's great, but like, I don't know if I'm into it. He never judged me on anything. So it made me feel really, really comfortable. The only thing that made him like furious is if I wasn't friends with other members of my family. That's what made him furious about all of the family, but he never judged me for anything else. So the way that he made me feel in a certain way was like he was captivating and really charismatic. And so all of his stories were like great and really funny, and all of his jokes were great. So I think I was just indoctrinated from a young age that was like just dazzled by him. I wanted to be around the most interesting person in the world and listen to his like fascinating stories and just be funny like him and tell stories like him. So even when I didn't realize that's what I was like picking up, that is what was happening. And I feel like there should definitely be boundaries between what grandparents share with their kids. Sure. But our relationship isn't a standard one. And, when you have to give your grandpa a talk about how he shouldn't have taken illegally obtained Viagra because he has a pacemaker and he's in his 80s, that's not a traditional relationship. Yeah, I own that. This is what we're living, right. It's a weird relationship. But I think he didn't really understand, even the internet, which is such a shame because he loved porn so much. Can you imagine how much free porn he would have watched? Yeah. Like if I could have even taught him about YouPorn, that's like one of my greatest regrets, truly. Sure. But, he didn't understand when I did that this is not happening, but I tried to show it to him and be like, and he's like, wait, what is this? And I was like, this is what I'm talking about when you got your dick surgery. And he's like, he has no recollection of it because he just blanked out that whole experience. So I was like, yeah, remember you got your dick surgery? And he's like, what? He's like, you told people about this? I was like, yeah. I was like, it has over 1 million views. And then he went, did you get paid? And I said, oh yeah. And he goes, yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
So
that's all
then
that
he just made peace with it.
That's great. Yeah. He sounds like a great grandfather despite, non-traditional stuff. But I can see, you're carrying in the legacy of seeing the world. So that is good. And I guess storing the tapes.
Can you imagine? My grandpa fucking his way around the world is now essentially what's motivated me to go around the world.
Right.
I didn't connect it, but I was like, oh no, I also want to travel, but to talk to people about sex.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, just a little bit, a few years later. But that's very cool. I feel like, kind of what you're saying about, stuff with comedy right now, right? How maybe that way of living. I like the idea of not caring what other people think. I'm aspiring to that one day, but I do find that very hard. I think that that's something that, I definitely feel people, sometimes I see people who are older and I'm like, maybe well into their 60s or 70s, and I can see that they find.
Don't worry, you can call me older. I'm not offended.
No, you're not in this category. I feel like I'm talking, I want to be like an invisible old lady kind of thing. Even though I think there was chat about this a little bit, like, maybe past 60 or something, say there's sort of the general feeling of like being invisible if you're a woman because there's literally like none in the media, or there are some, but they're because they got famous when they're quite young, and then they're basically trying
Honey,
to
in Los Angeles, right? It is 33.
Right,
let us be honest.
Yeah.
You're buried in the grave at 33.
Yeah, it's real rough. And obviously that's come to light a lot more within comedy because of everything that's been going on. But yeah, I guess I think
it's a lie. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I was just gonna say I think it's a lie if I was like gonna front like I don't care what people think. I guess what I'm trying to say is if I'm being my most authentic self and not a dick, and somebody hates on that, I have to be able to let that go. And that's taken a really long time, and I can't always do it. I think we just have to. Sometimes people call me out on stuff like, and I'm like, "Yup, you are right. This is where I say you are right." You know what I mean? Right. And I think we need to be open to that. It's just that we can't think that every criticism is valid. Sure. We also have critical thinking, and sometimes criticisms are not valid.
Yeah, especially when everyone can give them at any time of the day. From anywhere.
Twitter is just essentially you not asking for people to judge you, but them constantly judging you, and then you having to be like, well, is this important? No. Is this one important? Maybe. Right.
Yeah. And I find that, I think everybody is struggling with that to a certain amount, but also like the fact that, a lot of, I think what we have to give off as comedians is that we don't care. Because it's like, okay, this is sort of like where I'm coming from. And if we falter ever so slightly, then people will probably be more critical because they'll be like, oh, I see a window in which this person doesn't even think that they're funny. So let me get in there. Right. But I feel like, of course, because of the job, like we do kind of have to have that feedback because it's natural in like a live presentation of laughter or whatever, but also just generally, now, of course, videos online, right. Or tweets or any other shit. So I know when you were saying like, I guess the fact that, maybe your grandpa being able to live his life as he did, which is so cool to see, but also feels very male. I feel like that kind of thing, I've definitely seen that in the sense of like, I think I wish, I could be that way too, or that like we could all kind of like figure out how to find that person in ourselves. But sometimes I don't know what it is, right? It's like I feel like because sometimes women are criticized more, especially online. It kind of is a cycle at which then I think maybe the doubt starts and then it kind of feeds into itself. So I don't know. I just am trying to, I guess, talk about the current moment too with like general sexism in comedy, but and it's annoying because it's like, again, I don't like getting asked about like, well, what do you think about being a woman in comedy, when it's like, we're just comedy. What's happening? But of course,
no, it's different when you're talking to another woman in comedy about being a woman in comedy. I'll do that anytime. Sure. I just do not want to keep giving the same stock answers to men who already know the answer but are still trying to get me to talk about it for a reason that makes zero sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess the thing is to me, like, my grandpa gets to be considered like a rogue and like charming and like, you know, like adorable and hilarious. And I know that I'm part of that. And I also know that if he was a woman that did that sailed around the world and fucked a man in every port, people would say, what a fucking horrible mother. She doesn't have any values. She is a piece of shit that she prioritized sailing around the world over her own, you know, children and her own life with her partner. That's what they would say. My grandpa gets the benefit of the doubt. And because he grew up in a patriarchal place and we're still there, he gets to be the rogue and the charming one and like adorable and charismatic and be a cheater and be all of these other things. You know what I mean? So yeah, a woman doesn't get to be that. We don't get to be charmingly unlikable. We just get to be unlikable. It's like Tony Soprano, charmingly unlikable. Right. The woman, what's her name, who's married to the main character in Breaking Bad, bitch. Right. You know what I mean? Like, we don't get any sort of shades of meaning, like shades of judgment. It's all just like, you either are the ideal mother, the ideal wife, the ideal everything, or fuck you, you deserve to go to hell and burn in hell. Which is not at all how we view men. They get to be complicated and have multiple layers, and people can say things like, but Annie Hall is so great. Like, sure, he molested his daughter, or maybe he didn't, because I love Annie Hall. Like, look, we all fucking love Annie Hall, but like, come on, you know? Right. So I feel like that's kind of what you're saying about the dichotomy between the way men get treated in comedy and women get treated in comedy. Sure. We also, you're 100% right. It's not fair. And the things that are coming out now, I think are really important, because I think people who are not in comedy, who are just consumers, truly don't understand the system. Yeah. And it's like how a lot of white people right now are starting to understand how the police function and how police commissions function and how DAs function and how the system functions. This is the same thing for a lot of people who are just consumers of comedy, who don't really know what goes on. They assume that women and men who are comics get the exact same treatment and the exact same opportunities and are there on an equal footing from the get-go. And it takes a lot of things from us for people to realize, oh, wait, actually, I didn't ever think about what it would be like to come back to a place where I got sexually harassed because I needed to work out my jokes. Oh, I didn't realize how many places I would have to cross off my list of places I can perform at when I know that the person is predatory or is going to ask me out or is going to touch my ass or is going to bring me up as in an insulting intro. None of those things get really counted. And those are the things that are smaller and more insidious and are the microaggressions of the like comedy world for women, which is that implicitly you're not welcome. And when you're there, people question you for being there. And someone I know even on Twitter did a little study about how many times women get retweeted versus men, like comedians. Yeah. Doesn't look good, fam. It does not look good. No, I gotta look at that. Men are much more likely to retweet other men, and that is how it goes. So I just want to kind of lightly touch on all of that, because I know you asked a question that is a huge question, but I just want to kind of put these little seeds in case somebody's listening who hasn't really been a part of the comedy Twitter chatter about this. So it's like, yeah, just look up little things like that. Just check out very quickly about, you know, how many of your clubs lineups are all male with one or two exceptions, and about why you think that that's enough or that that's okay. I feel like me and you, when we're talking about it, we could do a shorthand. We could have this conversation in under 5 minutes if we wanted, just to cite all of the things we've been thinking about. And then in the end, then we would really get to spill the tea and maybe be like, tell me about the specific assholes. But people who are not in comedy don't really get that. So I think they get surprised when women are like tweeting en masse and we're all like angry. They're like, well, but what do you mean? Funny's funny.
Right.
And that's kind of what I wanted to touch on here is funny is a myth.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, yeah, just how objective that statement is, right? Like it's already flawed.
It's about accessibility. Funny's funny to who? To the gatekeepers, to the people that you're used to telling you what's funny. Who decides what's funny? Just think about that for like 1 fucking second. And all the guys that champion each other, that don't champion women, and why you listen to them over other people.
Yeah. I mean, it's all been really liberating just from like the, you know, listening and watching perspective of someone who's in it, but like I don't, you know, I'm not a huge Twitter person, so I kind of like peer in and then I'm like, okay, wow, yeah, okay, it's happening. All right, I got to go back to my shell. But I am, you know, I think what it's done just within myself is that I am like, so just the amount of gaslighting that happens within comedy, because you're kind of like, well, I mean, I guess maybe I should just tough it out. Like, I don't know. Is it that bad? I guess it's not that bad. Okay. You know, and then the fact that finally we're just calling it out, ideally for change, right? But if you know, if we're looking for immediate, I guess, change, it's just within our own community of female comedians or whomever's outsider comedian feeling that way, to be like, oh yeah, it's not just you, and like you can still find a way to do this, because look at everybody else who also feels similarly. So clearly there's a problem, and it's not a personal problem, it's a systemic problem or a, you know, institutional problem. So that's been helpful.
It is a systemic problem. One thing that I want to mention is, like, thank you for reminding me about this. Everything you just said is like 100% dead on. So when my album came out, it was #1 on iTunes, and I was like really excited and happy to celebrate. And I was like, this is such a fucking cool achievement. You know, I'm not a famous person. To see my album, you know, on the charts above Jim Gaffigan's and John Mulaney's, I was like, this is really, really cool. And then I was like, I feel so warm. Let me go and look down the charts and see what women comics that I've always admired am I trending next to, so that I could just like screenshot this for myself and feel like whenever I'm down, I can look at this and be like, hey, you were in the same company, you know, as Kathleen Madigan or Jackie Cation or Laurie Kilmartin, you know, just people you really admire. So that's, you know, I was even looking for a Wanda Sykes, like people that have been, you know, goddesses for so long. Wanda Sykes is like obviously huge, but I guess that's what I was expecting, you know, when I was looking on the iTunes comedy charts. So then I clicked and I was like, okay, well, that's weird. It's only dudes in the top 12. And then I clicked more and it expanded to the top 36. They were all men. All men in the top 36 other than me. And I didn't want to keep scrolling, even though I'm pretty fucking sure that it was even more than 1 out of 36. I think it was probably 1 out of at least 50. Not to mention that at that point they were all white, I think also. Maybe like 1 or 2 albums by Black comedians. And so I just thought that was so sad. And it really fucking ruined any kind of joy I could have gotten from being #1, because I was immediately angry. I was like, Why don't you let me have women peers?
Yeah.
That's fucking bullshit. You're telling me there aren't any 35 women that are good enough to trend in the top 36 along the dudes? That really fucking crushed me. And that was the case for days. And I just kept checking and checking. And until Celeste Barber's album started trending, that was the case. And I'm like so happy that she did, and more power to her. But it made me sad that like I couldn't even enjoy this for any amount of time, because I'm like, please don't make me the one token that you've let through for like a couple of days. And then that like days later I looked and literally fucking Cosby's albums were trending. I'm like, people would literally rather listen to a serial rapist than to try to listen to a woman. That is so wild to me, and so fucking sad that I mean, I want to weaponize fucking Twitter and Instagram on anybody to be like, can we do a moratorium so that for a while women actually get to trend on the iTunes charts at the same rate as men?
Yeah.
Because right now that shit is not even remotely equal.
Yeah, I mean, I remember doing like just looking at top podcasts too for a while there, and like that's something where you'd think, okay, well, it should be pretty somewhat equal, because you know, it's not just comedy at that point, right? But even then, it's so many male hosts, and it's something about, I mean, I don't know, but maybe, you know, this whole voice thing, I think it's just like when people are listening to their, you know, whatever radio station, I guess, are they used to male voices? And then they just like think, oh, well, we have to have one of them. I mean, I think for sure, like even listening to some of the bigger production podcasts that are like NPR or whatever, like they're maybe trying now, but of course they all started out and probably default were like, well, here's this podcast and we need someone to host it who literally has nothing to do with the production. So they're only, you know, who will maybe become involved. But if they are just bringing someone on as talent, maybe like they might default to a guy, and then slowly maybe they introduce female host later on or something. But it's very strange how off balance that is specifically. Obviously so many places are, but it feels like audio, you know, something's going on there because
And what I did when I found out is I tweeted a bunch of albums by women that I really like for people to purchase, because I was like, hey, can we get these women trending on the charts? Hey, guess what got very few retweets?
Right.
That. Even though when I tweet about a joke about my fucking titties, people will retweet the shit out of that. Mm-hmm. But it's like the second I'm like, hey, can you actually listen to some other shit that's hilarious? That's maybe not the shit that you were exposed to. It's nuts that people were like, no, I actually will not amplify this.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that is the retweeting stat that you mentioned too. That's interesting. I mean, it kind of comes down to like, I don't know. What is it? Is it a weird like power thing like too? I mean, it is, but I guess I'm thinking about, okay, when you're retweeting somebody, it is like an endorsement, or and it's maybe in the same vein of like how guys don't read books by women, stuff like that.
Same.
Or is it about like endorsing someone's knowledge and words? It's hard to get around that. And I do believe that, like, obviously something like retweeting, right? You do it so passively. So those are the things that I like to pay attention to, because it feels like those passive actions are the ones that we kind of default to, like, you know, the way that we
intrinsic
think the world
bias
works. Yeah, intrinsic bias, exactly. And I mean, I'm victim of it too, right? It's like, okay, thinking about what videos I'm going to watch, or, you know, things like that, or TV shows.
We're all fucking guilty.
Sure, yeah.
Let's be honest about that.
But yeah, it's always those like kind of things that go under the radar that we're like, whoa, and then we woke up and then it's 16 dudes on the lineup and like one woman, I think that name, you know, it's like, I hope so, but then you know, you show up and it's like a guy named Lauren, and you're like, okay, yeah, okay, cool, good for you. But yeah,
and he has the blonde dreadlocks, and you're like, oh no,
interesting. What a melting pot we have here. But yeah, what a time to be alive, you know. I don't know, how have you felt about just general, like, putting your stuff out there, putting your album out there? How have you felt about, like, feedback, or, you know, things that you didn't realize, oh yeah, this is kind of like the next step of putting your comedic voice out there because you made that move? So it's the next level.
What I said to, like, all my friends as soon as I did, I was like, oh, I immediately regret this. Because I think all of us are the same in terms of, like, you already know a better tag for that joke. You already know what you would have liked and all of that shit. But I was just like, I need to move on. I need to be just open to the idea that this is one of a bunch of albums I'm gonna put out.
Yeah.
So then that way it shouldn't feel, I guess, that dangerous. You know what I mean? But it does feel like that.
Right. I mean, the more that you put out there, then the less of a, I guess, big feeling that is the one thing representing you, right? Like, I even think about the fact that, you know, representation and stuff. It's like, okay, well, if that's the one TV show that you see where it's like female driven or female led, then we're like, well, that doesn't represent me because I feel like I'm kind of like this, you know. But then once there's like 20, you're like, okay, I can kind of splinter off and see what's going on.
I mean, I really think that women and other minorities deserve a chance to be mediocre.
Yeah.
Without it reflecting on all of us as a fucking whole.
Sure.
The thing that drives me so crazy is men have made most of the art, and so much of it is shitty, but because they make all of the art, no one's like, well, you made fucking Crash, so no more movies from men for a while.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen. But we fucking make a movie, or a movie is centered on us, and all of a sudden it's like, well, that failed, so that means all women fronted or women written or women directed things are terrible, right. So fuck that forever. I mean, why can't minorities be mediocre like fucking white cis hat men? Why can't we? Just give us a chance to be shitty in the middle or great like everybody else. There's gonna be a spectrum.
Right.
You're gonna have your Michael Bays, okay? We're not gonna be happy about it, but there's gonna be fucking shitty Michael Bays that are ladies. Michaela Bays are gonna happen. And then you're gonna have to deal with it. But I just do not want a Michaela Bay to like reflect negatively on the next fucking, I don't know, Donalda Glover. I don't know. Is that?
Oh, yeah. It's a very nice, exciting name. I thought you were going to say Donalda Trump for a second. I was like, ooh.
Oh my God, no.
But that is, you know, it's another Donald, which is the first time I made that connection. But yeah, I mean, I have a weird thing, I think, too, whenever, you know, coming up with a joke or saying some joke on some taping or something, right? Where I get so worried. I'm like, oh no, did I, you know, it's like, well, that could also be interpreted as maybe I'm saying something negative about, you know, women or Asians or something. So I kind of, you know, and again, that's like thinking too highly of myself in the sense of like, oh, you know, Sarah, nobody gives a shit what you're, you know, about that stupid video. But I would say sometimes it's like, okay, you know, you worry and you feel like you're representing this whole thing, and it's like, well, this is our 20th chance, you know, rather than our 5 millionth chance. So then that kind of weighs on, I think, productivity a little bit, because, you know, it's already scary enough, I think, for us to put our albums out there, to put our videos out there without thinking like, oh, I could have tweaked it a little bit. That's so natural. And then the level of like, oh God, well, if I put this out there, that's also a lot of like weird societal weight that like, I think, I don't know if we even need to put on ourselves, but for some reason it's there, of course, because we can't help but think about how others have had that impact on our demographic or whatever, which is weird. And I hope that goes away, but
Totally. And I feel like you probably know this as a minority woman, as a person of color. You feel like, oh shit, okay, I'm one of the trailblazers in this space. I better knock it out of the park. You know, it's like, I don't know that many refugee immigrant comedians that are, you know, Ukrainian Jews that are out there doing stand up. So because there's not a lot of us, obviously not a lot of us have gotten chances.
Sure.
So when I've gotten my chance, then it's like, well, I better be funny. I better not embarrass us, because if I do, then like that's the moratorium and anyone that's like me, you know, all of the bipolar, bisexual, Russian, Jewish immigrants are fucking done.
Yeah,
you know, that's how it feels. And I know you feel that pressure too.
Right, because it kind of feels, it's like, oh, they've been through enough. You know, what am I going to come in here and make it worse? No. But yeah, that's tough. I think, yeah, we can get there. It's going to be okay. But I definitely, yeah, it's a weird feeling. But I also don't want to bring it down too much. I still want to ask you about, you know, just general how you're doing, like, you know, we have our positivity theme on this podcast. So if you have any thoughts you've had recently, but, you know, also we're talking about some great stuff about how you put that into your comedy. So whatever comes to mind. But
so one thing that I've been thinking about is, so probably everyone is grieving during the pandemic, whether they realize it or not. And then some people might have had like personal tragedies happen that they're grieving as well. I mean, my grandpa died during this, so that's my own personal separate tragedy. And I think like one thing that I felt like being someone that's grieving feels like, I feel like you are either running or falling. There's no walking anymore, because that's just not where you're at when you're grieving. You know, you're either like, okay, I'm moving on, you know, here's the things that I'm doing to move on, to live my life, to be normal. And then there's, you know, the complete opposite, when you're just like randomly crying to a Taylor Swift song and you're like, what the fuck? I don't even like Taylor Swift. But now you realize like Cruel Summer is a thing that I cry to. So yeah. You know, when it happens, then you kind of start realizing like, oh, it's really hard to recover from a tragedy, or it's hard to grieve in a way that is just a slow, you know, like building up to you feeling better. That's not how things go. Things go in jumps. So you're going to feel like totally okay for a minute, and then you're going to feel all of the sadness and all of the weight of either the pandemic or your personal stuff. And you're going to be like, oh shit, now I've fallen. And then the next minute you're going to feel like you're running again. So I just want everyone to know that like, yeah, that's what grief feels like.
Oh, wow.
You're alternating between falling and running. And it's just going to be, the adjustment is going to be, you're going to run for longer and fall for shorter. But that's just the process. And as we're all grieving this pandemic and feeling like, wait, how is it that like one moment I'm fine and the next moment I'm so sad or so lonely or so something or so useless, or how come I was only able to accomplish one thing today? I just want everyone to know that it is extremes. That's what this feels like. Grieving is extremes. You're going from the best to the worst, and it feels messed up and hard. And I just want everyone to know that like, you're not alone. Everybody else is dealing with this in different degrees. And reach out to your friends. It really helps.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I hadn't heard that like analogy before, but I feel like that really helps visualize it a lot, you know, especially making it simple like that a little bit too, because it's always interesting because, I don't know, I guess people think about like the 5 stages of grief and, you know, all these other things that are maybe other ways of looking at it, but I hadn't heard that before. So that's really beautiful.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And then I guess, you know, also any other like things that you'd want to recommend or or even plug. I know we're winding down a little bit here. I don't want to keep you for too long, but
like things for people to stay positive, that kind of thing.
Yeah, sure. Recommendations for things to watch or read, even.
So I would recommend signing any change.org petitions that have to do with Breonna Taylor and Elijah McClain and any of the other people that have been murdered by the police.
Yes.
And when you sign up, you'll get like a daily action alert about things you can do every day. And I find that it takes a lot of my anxiety away about how terrible and unfair the world is when you do at least one thing a day to make it better. One day it can be signing something, another day can be sharing or tweeting something, the next day can be giving some of your money, the next day if you're comfortable protesting you can do that. But just I don't want people to feel like because this is hard that we quit. This is a long-term fight that we need to be a part of, especially white people. So parcel it out in little bites. Do something every day that contributes to a cause that's greater than you. It's going to make you feel better. It's going to make you feel less overwhelmed. It's going to make you feel like you're helping make the world a better place. And I feel like that's really helped me. And then little things like gardening. Just really slow, patient things that you have to work on that teach you how to be good and teach you how to nurture something from beginning stages to final stages, teaches you how to deal with pests. I mean, gardening is just such an education, honestly. Every time that I garden, I'm like, and I've done container gardening before. I had like been lucky enough to have like a raised bed. I've been gardening for like a long ass time. And you can definitely have a container garden if you have an apartment. Just know that tomatoes require at least 9 inches soil deep.
Oh, wow. Even
that's my only tip.
Tomatoes.
Yeah, they really need the depth.
Sure.
And I mean, honestly, like, be gentle with yourself. This is a crazy time to be alive in, but it's also a really powerful time to be alive in. You can be part of some really cool things right now. It's like being alive during the civil rights movement. Be a person, be somebody that is connecting to other humans during this time of unrest and like hate and really horrible stuff. So I think we're all failing a little bit all the time. So we just need to keep trying all the time.
Cool. Yeah, that's beautiful too. I mean, I even like the sort of like the connection between gardening and like, you know, the action everyday thing. It's like, you know, of course it's sometimes looking at a lot of this stuff, it does feel like it's like, oh, well, what difference can I make? But, you know, it's little by little. And I think it's even nice to actually see that other people are in this with you too. So you're like, it's very easy, I think, to look at Twitter or you know, the headlines and be like, oh man, that random person over there is doing something horrible. But then there's also a bunch of random people right here doing, you know, good stuff too. So
exactly. Yeah. And don't believe in virtue signaling. It's a fucking myth.
Oh yeah, that's frustrating.
You know what I'm saying? Like, just do good shit. And it's been proven actually when you share that you gave to a campaign or a cause, when you share that you did, it does encourage other people to give.
Oh, cool.
So don't let anybody just say virtue signaling and let you feel bad about doing stuff. It's better that you do stuff and tell people you do stuff than not to do anything at all. So just do stuff.
Yeah. That's such a strange phenomenon that like, I mean, I guess it's been around, but it kind of like popped up at the wrong time. It's like, well, yeah, I think we need more people to do stuff, even if they want to talk about it. Yeah. That's a great advice. And then I guess anything that you want to plug of yours too. I mean, obviously we've talked about Father's Day. And
I guess that's my number one thing right now is my album Father's Day. Please feel free to get it. 10% of all sales in perpetuity of that album or any of my merch that goes with it goes to BLM.
Yay. Cool.
Because I just wanted to make sure I make like a lifetime change.
Sweet.
And not just a one-time donation.
Sure.
Yeah, and if you go on my website, you'll also find sad dad cards, which are illustrated Father's Day jokes, essentially, or jokes about bad dads.
Nice.
And I also have daddy issue earrings. They're hoops. Ooh. One hoop says daddy and the other one says issues.
Oh, wow.
So if you want any of that, come to the website. Again, 10% of everything goes to BLM.
Sweet.
I appreciate you, Sierra.
Yes, thank you again for coming on the podcast, and thanks for sharing all your wonderful advice and stories. Congrats
Thanks
again.
so much for having me. And check out 420 Day Fiance or Private Parts Unknown. Those are my 2 podcasts.
Yay.
That's it.
All
Boop.
Right.
I'm out.
Yay. Thank you. All right. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to that episode with Sofiya Alexandra. Obviously, check out all her stuff, sofiaalexandra.com. Check out Father's Day, her awesome new album, and all her podcasts. And then, and then have a great week, Take it easy. Take it easy. A little special announcement. I'm going to play us out on a new theme song for the podcast. I'm going to keep AJ Raphael's incredible theme song and also maybe add this as our outro song. Maybe put it as an intro song. Who knows where it'll end up. But this one was made by my lovely partner and boyfriend, Dylan Van Auken. And enjoy.